Will you pray with me? God of all, you welcome us home. May we live in that love. Amen. I don't know about you, but every time I hear the story of the prodigal son, I forget what prodigal means. I know it must be a negative term because the story to which it's attached is one of a scoundrel who breaks his father's heart by taking his inheritance and leaving home and squandering it on fast living. I like that, loose women. With friends who abandon him as soon as he runs out of cash. Prodigal must be really bad. So this time I looked it up because I thought, now I'm the minister, so I should know. So according to a dictionary I found online, prodigal means to spend money or resources freely and recklessly with a wasteful extravagance. It's having or giving something on a lavish scale. So you can see why this story is called the prodigal son. His wastefulness is all the more reckless because the cash he spends is his inheritance, which he wasn't really entitled to have until after his father had died. And in Jesus' time, if you took your inheritance early, you actually severed yourself from the family. You had no more right to be in the family home or to the profits from the farm or any other benefit which was reserved for children. It was kind of like saying, when you ask for your inheritance, I'm not part of this family anymore. Now, if you think back to first century Palestine, you know that it was heavily patriarchal. And what that means is that the oldest male has control of the rest of the family and all the servants and the slaves under his care. The culture is heavily influenced by these notions of honor and shame. And so men were responsible for ensuring that all their household did what was right. And I might add that none of the women were loose women, and that none of them could bring shame upon the family. So again, this son who has left, and he's fallen so far away from what was proper that he actually was working amongst pigs. And for Jewish people, that would be like an untouchable. So this son has brought great shame upon this family. And any father worth his salt in that culture would shun this son in order to preserve the family's honor. And if he ever returned to the family home, he should be turned away and he should be sent to fend for himself. So in that light, it's easier to see then how truly remarkable are the actions of his father when this son returns home. Because instead of rebuking him or letting him work in the fields as he asked, this father is lavish with his love. He welcomes him back as a child, and he celebrates his return with a feast, it says, that is reserved for the most honored of guests. And he does this without even having one of those dad conversations. You've heard them. Have you learned your lesson? You know that was really foolish. You're going to have to hunker down now and face reality. This is when my father says to me, or he did, trust is like a bank account. You have to make deposits. Or this one, which gets you every time, you broke your mother's heart. That's how these conversations are supposed to begin. And then after that, after the father is sure that the child will never stray again and is suitably remorseful, then the hug can happen. But instead of the recriminations that we're all used to, the father welcomes him with lavish love that defies the norms of the culture. In effect, then, the father bestows prodigal love on the son, and he is a prodigal father. His care is wastefully extravagant, and he grants forgiveness freely and recklessly. He gives all he has on a lavish scale. And anyone who heard this story would immediately know there is something different about this kind of father. So every family has a favorite, the one who can do no wrong in the parents' eyes. Usually it's the baby of the family. They mess up and they're forgiven. They're always needing money or a place to stay, and the parents always give in. They spit in the face of convention and dance to the beat of their own drummer, and they have no sense of propriety and seem to be disrespectful of the way of life that has been won for them by the hard work and sacrifice of their parents. And then we have the older son. He can also be found in most families. He's the good and proper one. He or she who keeps all the rules, who does what they're told, and who judges everyone else for not living up to their fine example. You all deal with someone in your family like that, I'm sure, and if you don't, maybe you're it. Bob says most church folks are the older son. So they, like this boy's brother, are doing what they have been told is right. And the older brother resents the younger, but in his mind, he's only trying to protect his father. After all, what's to say that this scallywag won't decide after a week or so that he can't take it and he leaves again? What if he worms his way into his father's good graces and wastes what's left of his money as well? These are legitimate questions for the older son. He's not mean-spirited or uncaring. He has been betrayed by his younger brother. And he is understandably angry that his dedication and sacrifice for the family has not been noticed. The story of the prodigal son is so compelling because it's so common. We live these stories in our families today, and the characters live among us. But in the context of this Jesus parable, it's not just a story about family. It's a lens through which we view this revolutionary Jesus movement that has upset this tidy order of the first century world in Palestine. To the religious authorities, this Jesus questions them at every turn, and he insists that their rules are oppressive, that the elites in the society are benefiting while the poor are forgotten, and worst of all, he presents God, their Father, not as a distant one who judges and must be placated through conformity and sacrifices, but as a kind of daddy, an Abba, one who loves lavishly and forgives without reserve. And if Jesus is right, then the religious leaders are wrong. And that they cannot have. That they cannot fathom. So we recognize this polarization in so many areas of our culture. If you're right, I'm wrong. And you are other to me because you threaten my way of life or my dreams for what my life will be. Most of us exist somewhere between the polarities, between the ones who would keep everything the same and those who want everything to be different. And if we wonder if there can ever be a resolution and if peace will ever come among us. And so back to our story. Because in the center of the tension between these two brothers is the prodigal father. He bestows his prodigal love that has the power to hold it all together. Without that prodigal love, the bridge will never be crossed. But the choice is for each of them to make. Will the older son welcome his younger brother and go to the feast? Will the younger son honor his family as he should? Or will they both fall into old patterns that reinforce their division that exists between them? Do we accept prodigal love? Or do we insist we are right? This is the question before us. And so as parents, and especially the fathers here today, whether you run that tight ship with rules that raise tough-minded, fair-minded kids, or whether you have a house where creativity and chaos shape the lives around you, begin with prodigal love that embraces that child even in the midst of terrible mistakes with unfortunate consequences. There is more to come for sure, but lavish love breaks down the barriers that exist in your families. And for the graduates and the scholarship recipients who are moving into a new phase in your lives, whether you go to school and play by all the rules, you go to classes and you study and you never go out or have any fun at all, or whether you take this time to find yourself and question authority and tradition, do it with prodigal love that overcomes barriers and holds all as God's children. And whether this church is a conventional one that practices our faith in an honorable traditional way, or whether it is one that is diverse and risk-taking, it is only if prodigal love remains our core that we become what God is calling us to be. When the divisions are so great that we feel like we will never understand each other, prodigal love is there to overcome and embrace. Because at the center of that prodigal love is that prodigal father who says, let's have a celebration, all of us, because we were lost, but now we're found. We're together, and that's all that matters. Prodigal people, sharing prodigal love, that is what will make all the difference.